All right, peace and prosperity. Peace, beloved. It's Seiko Varner with another episode of Get On Code, the Fly Guys Show. And the Fly Guys Show is a series of melanated conversations focused on improving our collective situation. It's firmly based in the empowerment agenda, and the empowerment simply says that we are going to use our collective political, spiritual, financial, and attention-based resources to improve our situation. We're going to do things a little differently than they were done in the past. We're focusing on the empowerment agenda. Today, we're going to deal with something that's really dear to me. My father passed away 10 years ago. Maybe 30 or so years ago, my mom and I had a very big argument, and my mom would flip sometimes, and I would say, I don't understand it, Dad. And he said, well, something happened to your mother years ago before I met her, and it changed her forever. And I didn't understand that until I had a conversation with my mother a few years ago when she shared me in high school on graduation day, as they were celebrating graduation at a graduation party. An ex-boyfriend was physically abusive towards her and actually knocked her unconscious. So while other people were celebrating their graduation or they're soon to graduate, she was unconscious. And that impacted her the remainder of her life. I'm so glad that my father understood that, and I didn't understand that until recently. So I've become really concerned with changing the culture as it relates to domestic violence, particularly violence upon women. I realize it happens to a lot of other groups and cultures and people. I understand that, and we want violence to end against everyone. I'm focused, however, on ending violence on sisters. And today we're going to deal with the conundrum of violence in the faith-based community, violence in religion. So does God hate women? That was the name of a book that delved into that, and that's going to be the build that we have tonight. Does God hate women? Domestic violence and religion. And so I'm so stoked to bring back to the Fly Folk one of the original Fly Guys, one of the original Fly Folks, my brother from another mother and father, my beloved brother, Dan Trez Omi. What's good, brother? How you doing, soldier?
Peace, man. I'm doing good, man. Thank you for having me aboard again.
Hey, man. Hey, it's not the same whenever you're not there. So Dan Trez Omi, we're going to get into a little bit about him a little later on. He has a great podcast if you're in the podcast. I also want to bring on a sister and brother I just spent a little time with earlier today. I want to bring on sister and brother Amin, Dr. Shafiq Amin, and his lovely wife, Kaima. How y'all doing today?
Good.
Doing well.
Peace.
How are you?
Things.
Peace.
Hey, doing great. They're doing great. So as you can see, they're with a group Muslims in America. They're going to come from an Islamic perspective. Dan Trez Omi is an atheist, and he's going to bring his perspective. Also, we're going to go ATR style, and I want to bring in one of my spiritual teachers, I guess. Baba, I call him Big Mike, but we're gonna call him Awo. We're gonna say Baba, and Baba is, father of mysteries. Baba, how you doing, Baba?
I'm doing good, brother. Thank you for having me up here. But they can call me Baba Ifaleye, Baba Mike, Big Mike. Just as long as you call me, I'm good.
Call you for dinner time, right?
Yes.
Hey, so one of my spiritual teachers, Baba, and also we have the sister who's been flaming up a lot, really showing up and showing out. This sister is on top of things, like the hip hop song said. So I want to bring back to the fold Queen Phoenix. Flame on, sister, flame on. What's good?
Ashe, and peace.
That's right. Let the circle say amen. Let the family say ashe. That's right. And Queen Phoenix has the Phoenix Rise movement. She'll talk a little more about that. She's coming from a a Christian perspective. And we have one of the other sisters who works with the Phoenix Rise movement, Sister Valerie, on tap tonight. What's up, Sister Valerie? How you doing?
How's it going? Amen.
All right. So look, we have some other people who will be joining us a little later on. But I want to start off by saying that I'm just so deeply disturbed that we have so much abuse in the religious, in the religious and the faith-based community, a lot of domestic abuse in the faith-based community. And I'm blown away when I look at the numbers. And currently, during our COVID-19 quarantine, the numbers have actually risen. So while people are praying more, while people are engaged in even more religious ritual and spiritual work, there's more abuse happening. And that just, I'm blown away by that. So I wanted to just get a different perspective from a lot of different people. Queen Phoenix, you've been following the numbers. So what's happened during the COVID-19 quarantine in relation to domestic violence?
Well, what's been happening is just the overall rise. The time that they're spending together, people are now in close proximity with each other. They don't have that break time. Before, when the husband could go to work or the wife could go to work, the kids at school, you have that time away for you to kind of digress, or you can kind of get your mind away. I kind of go into a daydream atmosphere where you're not dealing with the stresses of the family. But now, since we've been at home, kids are not at school, you're constantly spending that time together. And it's not just the husband and wife. I'm even seeing it where it's sons hitting their mothers, because I saw one event today where a domestic violence was called because the son punched his mom in the face because she hid the toilet paper. So it's getting to the point that these close proximities with people is causing them to now act out. It's things that they probably have held inside, other avenues that they use to release that stress. But now, because we're like in the house and it's hard to get out and go places, it's becoming really, really rising right now. And this is the time where we need more than ever to have things like this to give people a way out, things that people can now focus on and do to release that pressure, because it's a lot of pressure when you're at home, when you're dealing with the kids, you're dealing with the husband, you're dealing with the outside elements of the world. And on top of it, you're now having to deal with each other, and finances is a part of it. It's just a lot, and the pressure is on. And the thing is, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to help these people release themselves so that way we can minimize people going to violence to try to release it? So that's the question that's on the table. What are we going to do to release, for them to find another avenue versus resulting to violence to release their frustration?
And that's a great question. That's something that I definitely want us to focus on tonight. What's interesting is in our last build, we had somebody who commented, and they stated that they thought that a lot of the abuse was happening not in the Christian household, but in the Islamic household, and those who followed Islam. And I was kind of thrown off by that. Brother Shafiq and Sister Kalima, what are you seeing within your community? And is that a accurate description? Is it happening more in Muslim households?
I can't speak for if it's happening more in Muslim households, but it's definitely happening. I think the primary reason, from my opinion, is that a lot of people, Muslims and non-Muslims, are not really educated about Islam, even within the community. And we have to make sure we educate our children, ourselves, men and women, about the rights of women in Islam. And the biggest thing I see, even for practicing Muslims and non-Muslims, is they confuse Islam with culture. And there are many cultures around the world that are encompassed within the Muslim community. And oftentimes, especially people who are not that knowledgeable, they confuse what's happening in the culture with what should be happening in the religion. And they have to really study and educate themselves to make sure that they understand clearly what is in the Quran and what is it that we see people practicing in their cultural lives.
Wow. Is there anything that would give any rise to that happening in Islam when Islam is a religion of peace? That's the way we've been taught.
Well, I think, Brother Seiko, one of the issues, and it's a continuing issue that some Muslims have within the Islamic community, is there's a verse in the Quran in chapter 4, verse 34, where in the verse itself, it talks about lightly beating your wife. But the issue with that is that the translation of the Arabic verse into English, the words that they're using for beat doesn't even translate into English. So that interpretation that some Muslim brothers have decided to adopt gives them, I guess, in their own mind, some type of license, I guess, religious license, in order to strike their wives lightly. But that is, as my wife mentioned, that is completely cultural. It has nothing whatsoever to do with Islam. And when Muslims, just like if a Christian says that they follow the ways of Jesus, well, with Muslims, then we look at the example of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and Prophet Muhammad condemned any man that would lay hands on a woman. And if that is supposed to be our ultimate example, that is supposed to be what we follow, as opposed to listening to some hearsay and then going on with that. So if there's any domestic violence going on, or a rise in domestic violence within the Islamic community, just realize that that is something that is not sanctioned by the faith whatsoever. It's just a matter of men misinterpreting what they read, and then, sadly to say, in some cases, that the wives wind up becoming the victims.
And even if you look at in Islam, women have more rights than men. We have so many rights in Islam, and we have to make sure that we understand and read and educate ourselves and our daughters and our sons about these rights. And the only thing, women have the right to work. Women have the right to drive. We have the right to our own finances, to own property, to choose who we want to marry. We have the right to divorce. So why would we not have the right to safety in our own homes? And we clearly have that right, that's been given to us by Allah. We don't have to request that right from anybody else, from our husbands, from our fathers, our brothers, the men in the community. Allah has already given us the right to safety in our own homes, with our own person, and what to do with our bodies.
That's very intriguing, because that doesn't seem to be what most people think when they think of Islam. So, Queen Phoenix, you've helped a lot of people. And I know you come from a Christian background as well. You're heavily involved in your church and your religious community. What are you seeing when you see people who are seeking help and need to get out of abusive relationships as it relates to their religious belief?
Well, one of the things that I'm seeing when people are looking to get out, especially for a Christian base or someone who comes from a Christian based background, the first thing that we've always taught to do is pray. Take everything, to Christ, take everything to God. He definitely understands. He will make a way. He'll open the door when there's no way. He'll give you the strength that you need to actually figure out how to get out. And for me, when I grew up, because I grew up in church from the time of birth until 18, when I decided to leave the church and find my own way. The church that I kind of grew up in, they really taught the women, they took it serious about the submissive part in the Bible. Like, the women need to submit themselves to their husband. And the way that it was taught was that, hey, your husband is the head of the house. He makes the final decision. And in most cases, because of that, is why you have most women that feels like they have to do everything they need to do before they leave. I know that's how it was for me. I wanted to make sure that I did everything I could possibly do to keep my marriage before I decided to say, okay, I need to get out of here. So in most Christian-based homes, that's what you're going to see, because they want to walk by faith, not by sight. So they feel like, well, hey, because I just need to pray and my faith will see me through, or the me praying for my husband will get him to change, not realizing that what you're seeing, what you saw in the beginning was the facade. But now what you're seeing now is the true him. And we can't sometimes balance the two or correlate the two, because we're too busy trapped in the jail cell in our mind that what we had from the beginning is who he is. We just need to pray to get that person back. But that person is not coming back, because that's not who that person was from the beginning. And I think that's a lot of times where we're fooled at with faith.
Wow. So you're seeing that not only in the Christian-based households, but you're saying in general that the people in general are being kind of confused, because they're looking at this gentleman and they're dating him and they're getting all the right messages, but they're really not getting the truth about that person. That's kind of intriguing. Dan Trezomi, I know that you left the church. You were like I was involved in a liberation-based theology in New York. So unmute yourself and let me know what you're thinking, because I know you come from a different perspective when it comes to violence upon women. Why do you think that this is happening?
Let me just say, let me just say this. And I think Amin's pointed this out, that it's more cultural than anything. You know, right? We have what's called intimate partner violence, right? And that's violence between, people that they don't live together. Domestic violence means that they live together. Intimate partner violence, or IPV, means that they don't live together. And we know that intimate partner violence, like you mentioned the example of your mother earlier, we know that intimate partner violence starts as early as high school. We've seen instances where it started in middle school. So actually, domestic violence is much more normalized than we care to admit. And I hang out at the barbershop. I know it's been a while. But if you go to the barbershop and you have these conversations, you're going to learn that a lot more men have assaulted their significant others than we like to believe. Happens much more often than we care to admit. And a lot of the reasons why men don't talk about it is because oftentimes they're the perpetrators of this crime over and over again. And domestic violence can be seen differently. It doesn't just have to be me grabbing somebody or hitting somebody. It could also be emotional and verbal abuse as well. Economic abuse, controlling them, manipulation, passive aggressiveness. It could be many different things. So I think overall, a lot of times, as men, we don't want to listen to women when they tell us about these things, when these things go on, because a lot of times the people that are perpetrating these crimes are our fathers, our uncles, our brothers, our cousins, our best friends, our frat brothers, our college friends, our bosses, our favorite coworker. These are the men that are doing it upon our women. So I think we need to just be more open about that. Number one, listen to the stories of these women, and actually, in some cases, I would like to see us, mete out more justice when it comes to that, because oftentimes justice is not served.
Justice is not often served. Sister Joy, the memoirs of a karmic dynasty. I know you actually had two abusive relationships that you had to deal with. Was there any justice that was dealt out with the violence that you experienced?
There was only one relationship. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay. So there was only one relationship, and that was the relationship with myself. It just got divided into two subsections, two sub relationships. Justice was served, and it continues to be served from what I see and hear in through passing sometimes day to day. Some things I did myself, so I feel like within myself is justified. I got some peace, I got some closure, And there is, I think, karma that has dealt with those two individuals as well as myself in healing and continuing on onto my path in this life. And so, yeah, justice is served. I'm not sure how each individual wants to define it, but definitely it's been served.
All right. Want to continue with your story. I know you have a really strong point you want to make in regards to domestic violence and religion. How did your religion experience keep you in a domestically violent relationship? And then tell us what your point is.
I was under the apostolic faith, but first, my mother raised me to know the Bible, to know God, but not to know the church building as a place to acknowledge God. She taught me where two or more come in my name is how God is acknowledged and how people come together. So that whole type experience, I got under the apostolic faith by my first marriage, and I would say I had a strong want and need at that time to know a religion other than what I felt like my mother was trying to keep me from. So first, jumping into it, curiosity kept me in. The newness of it all kept me in. I also led a sheltered life, so the coming together with other people with so-called like minds kept me in, and then being wanting to save my marriage actually kept me in as well. And knowing that apostolic faith was a strong part of his background, generations back in his family, they all attended that same church. And also me being sheltered in life as a child, I didn't have family on either side. So it gave me my family roots that I always look for as well. I'm not Could you jog my memory on my point I want to make? Because I don't remember having.
You know what, sis? Actually, I think you had an interesting point, and you have a strategy that I want to bring you back on a little later on for you to share with anyone who needs to leave a domestically abusive relationship. But at this point, I want to bring on Baba Mike. I know that you're involved in ATR and Ifa in one of the African traditional religions. Do we see the same level of domestic violence in relationships that are grounded in ATRs?
Ifa, I can't speak to other ATRs, but in Ifa, that's not something we see frequently. That's not to say it's not there, but it's something that is really not tolerated in any way, form, or fashion. But one of the things that we look at is we deal a lot with saying that everything is about energy. So you can't attract something that you are not. So what happens is, or that you're not a part of, or vibrating on that level. So what happens is, if you have a young lady who's been abused the majority of her life, then when she grows up, if she says, I'm never going to let another person put their hands on me, if she walks into a room with 100 men, if it's one man in there that is going to beat her, that's who she'll be attracted to, and he'll be attracted to her, because they're vibrating on the same level. And the only way to shift and change that is to change the way that you think, which is usually rooted in how you feel about yourself. I know in Ifa, we have an understanding that the woman is the womb of creation. So thereby, the patterns that we used for divination purposes are called Odu. And the woman's womb is the Odu pot, where this Odu comes from. So the moment that a man abuses that Odu pot, he is abusing the universe. He is putting himself in not in a good position. And another thing, in Ifa, we work on something called Iwa Pwele, which is some people translate it as good character. We call it, but it can also be said to have gentle character. And so everything is about your character. And so when situations show up, we often we tell people they need to ask themselves, why am I having this experience right now? Not to place blame on anyone else, but we have an understanding that each one of us is a little piece of this energy that we have labeled as God, Allah, Yahweh, Jehovah, white Jesus, whatever you want to call it. Each one of us is a little piece of that energy having a physical experience. So this makes you the writer, as my teacher would say, Baba Femi, he would say, you are the writer, the director, the producer, the lead actor, the light person in this movie called your life. So if it's something going on, the question is, why are you having this experience? So this puts the blame in each individual's lap of, why am I having this experience? So if you're in that situation, you need to ask yourself, why am I having this experience? Why did I choose this person? Why is this person in my life? So we really don't see that violence. Now people coming in, a lot of that will be there. And then we have to explain it as sister, I can take them back to child. They don't even have to tell me. The moment the abuse is there, I already know it's something from their childhood that has programmed their computer brain to accept this thing that's coming. So you will turn away the signs and symbols. How the sister said, you thought you had this one person and they flipped into this other person, and you're praying to get that other person back, but that person was never there. So there are always signs and symbols in the beginning of a relationship that tells you who someone is. It's just whether or not you're choosing to ignore that situation in any given moment. And so we really don't see a lot of domestic violence with any fire, at least in the organization that I belong to, OIDSI. So I don't know. We really don't have it like that because we have a different understanding of who we are, what our purpose is, and finding that purpose so that each one of us is here to fulfill a particular destiny. So why are you having that experience? I'm sorry. Am I rambling now? My fault.
All right, Sister Valerie, you've had the opportunity to work with a great number of women who've been in domestically abusive or intimate, IPR or IPV, like Danny said. So is there a connection between their spiritual belief and what they'll accept and what they go through?
Absolutely, for the most part, that I've experienced with the population that I have served. What I noticed, the common theme is the religion backgrounds and the theme of submissiveness and how it's taken out of context and how the abuser uses that as a catalyst to keep them suppressed and subdued and controlled. And in doing so, it's crippling the victim or the abused. And she's looking at the family system. She's looking at her spiritual journey. Everything that she has found strength in has now become used as a weapon against her of guilt, making her feel guilty if she were to leave or break up the family in those extreme situations of experiencing abuse. And so what I've gathered from that as well is giving her her power back and allowing her to realize that it was used as a manipulation technique, which is one of the abuser's dominating characteristic. And I would like to spearhead off of what the brother just said. He's absolutely correct when he says it's a cultural thing, but it's also goes back to the person that's doing the abusing, their childhood of unresolved issues or observational learning, what they seen happen in their home or around them growing up and thinking it's a norm. Unfortunately, this is the way you show love. So that hit is a form of love. And that's how they were taught that that's love, unfortunately, in most cases. Yeah.
Wow. So now let's kind of talk some solutions. So Sister Joy, I want to bring you on just for a second. And if you can share that bit of knowledge that you had on how a person can remove themselves from this situation. And then we're going to go through round robin, and based upon our spiritual walks, we can possibly share some things that are in our spiritual walks that might be helpful to the sisters who need to remove themselves from these abusive situations. So, Sister Joy, you talked about 3 steps, a 3-step process that you recommend to help people leave abusive relationships. If you can give those, and then we're going to pull you out, okay?
Okay. First step, prepare. Second step, plan. Third step, wait. Prepare, plan, and wait.
All right, let's go a little deeper. What are you preparing for?
You are mentally preparing for your departure from the relationship. You have to first see it, visualize it, and then you'll be able to properly plan it. And then once you've had the plan, then while you're in wait, you prepare to take action at the appropriate time.
All right. All right. Thank you, sis.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sis. All right. So the sister said, prepare, plan, and wait. Prepare, plan, and wait. So Queen Phoenix, how well does that strategy work?
That strategy works very, very well. I know when I prepared myself to go, like she said, you first have to visualize it. And I go back to exactly what Valerie said and the gentleman said before, because you do have some ladies that probably have some type of abuse in their past before they get with the second abuser. But then you have some women that are very strong. They are very able and capable of standing on their own. And then they have predators that actually seek them out, and they take the strength, they take everything that made her the person she was, the strong woman that she was. And as Valerie said, they use it against her, her strength, her gifts, they use it against her to actually manipulate her, to put her into this mental, I call it a mental jail, because they first has to capture your emotions. Because it's not that you are seeking that, you're looking for that. It's when you find that person and they're vibing with you, because they're coming in like they're this person who really cares, they're this person who's this way and that way, and you're looking at that part of them that says, okay, that fits with my goal, my vision, and where I'm headed. And then after they get you emotionally connected and emotionally tied up with them, then that's when the atmosphere change. So once you get there, the proper way to prepare is that you have to prepare mentally, which means you have to now be able to cut that emotional tie, that emotional connection. You have to reach deep down inside and find that strength that you once had inside that made you who you are, because they've already stripped you of that. You've been so busy trying to adapt to what they wanted you to do so the abuse can stop, that you lose yourself in the process. So preparing is preparing yourself mentally, finding your strength back so you can stand back on your 2 feet, and then you can be able to identify. Then the planning is 1, take notes. You have to take notes of the signs that you saw. You can't just say, okay, this happened with that individual. No, it's signs there. Like the gentleman said before, it's just before you didn't take notes. But before you leave, part of your planning is you better have your notes to be able to identify those signs. So when the next person comes along, you can identify the signs a lot quicker, and you can say, oh no, I'm not going down that road again. And that was one of the things that I did. I prepared myself mentally. 2, I planned by taking notes. So therefore, when I got out of this situation, I didn't find myself in a second abusive relationship, because I thank my ex-husband every day that he taught me how to smell bull crap a mile away. So because of the copious notes I took, when the next person came along, oh no, you're showing this. No, I'm sorry, I gotta go. So that's also part of planning. Don't just say, hey, I'm planning to get out, because if you're not emotionally planning, if you're not taking the copious notes, you're going to find yourself in that cycle where most women find themselves in 2, 3, sometimes 4 different abusive relationships. It's a different person, but it's the same bullcrap. So it's like, what are you going to actually truly plan for? And then the waiting is now waiting for the right time to leave. I believe that God deals in timing and not time. Don't rush it, because if you rush it and you go too quick, you're just going to find yourself back in the same cycle. It's going to be the same crap, just with a different person. So that's how we implement all three of those plans.
Wow, that's powerful, sis. I'm glad that we have this instruction that we can share. I also want to bring in Brother Frederick Jones L. from the Moorish Science Temple. Now, I know that the Prophet Noble Drew Ali left some great instructions for us. Did Prophet Noble Drew Ali say anything about the way that we need to treat the relationships that we have, particularly with our sisters?
Yeah, true indeed, brother. Peace. So I'll start with the first chapter in the Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America. It's called The Creation and the Fall of Man. And basically it just talks about man's carnal state being a foe that he must fight, you know, just telling you that man is imperfect. We're imperfect. I'm imperfect. And a lot of times the battle is with you, you see, knowing that you must do what's right. You know, sometimes having that conversation with yourself, that still small voice, you know, letting you know what's right and wrong. So a lot of times the battle is the flesh, you see, and, you know, it's just about making sound and right decisions, because it starts with the thought. Then it goes from that to the verbal and then to the physical. Like I think the topic is domestic violence, correct, in religion and in schools of thought. So before it goes to the physical, it starts here. Then words are being spoken, and then it gets to the next phase. So it's just about knowing that it's the flesh, is you, and it's about just making sound decisions, because it starts with a thought. And this is chapter 1, the creation and the fall of man, and it just talks about knowing that our carnal nature is something else. So, yeah.
All right. Dan Trez Omi, you've been in a situation where you've helped a lot of sisters. Some of them have been in abusive relationships. You're an atheist. So is there anything in the atheist thought and values that would help the women who are atheists pull themselves out of domestic?
There's no written doctrine for atheists, just to let you know that. I know a lot of people always say, what do y'all do? There's no, just think of it, I know I'm going off on a tangent. Just think of it as like somebody who collects stamps, right? You have somebody that collects stamps, and then you have people that don't collect stamps. What do you call people that don't collect stamps? Right? So I kind of like want you to look at it that way. Anyway, what I want to say though about domestic violence is the two things that I think we need to do is, number one, when we start having this conversation about domestic violence, I noticed that the onus is always put on the victims, right? I think that's probably like when it comes to women, when it's like misogyny or misogynoir or any violence or rape culture, the onus is always put on the victims. I don't see that in any other crime, right? I never see that like if like this is a murder that goes on. Nobody says, well, what did the victim do or say, right? When there's like a robbery, no one says, well, what did the victim do? They always focus on the perpetrators. And when it comes to domestic violence or IPV, intimate partner violence, we always put the onus on the victim. Always. That, you know, when a young woman comes up to me and says, oh, I thought about my boyfriend, the first thing we ask is, well, what did you do? And it's just like, really? You know, like really, like in what universe does something, if you say something bad to me, where is it okay for me to assault you? That's not how we should operate. So when we start talking about domestic violence, we should really talk about what do we do about the perps? Who's doing these, right? Because to be quite honest, when we talk about domestic violence, we always think that it's that person over there that does it, that doesn't look like us, that's either a super alcoholic or a drug addicted, or they're like scourge of the society. No, there's no demographic. There's no demographic. Matter of fact, I'll go on a limb to say that domestic violence happens way more than we care to admit, right? We really, really do. The second thing we need to discuss is that, gentlemen, we need to step up to the plate. When we want to talk about domestic violence, the first thing we say is, and look, I don't give a fuck what white people think. Let me just say that right up front. We always say we don't want to air our dirty laundry. You know what I mean? We don't want to, let's show, bro, you're making brothers look bad. Nah, we make ourselves look bad. If women don't feel safe around us, we should not be talking about liberation, right? If women don't feel safe around us, we should not be talking about knowledge of self. And let me just say this, bro. I'm trying to tell y'all, go to the barbershop and discuss domestic violence. And you will be surprised how many men in that room have assaulted their significant others. Some of them more than once, right? Some of them have been doing it for a long time. And we really need to start talking about that, gentlemen. We really do. Because if we don't, we're not going to fix it. Matter of fact, it'll get worse. And we're going to pass it on to our babies. And that's even the worst part. We're going to pass it on to our babies. I'm going to tell you one story. I am an educator. I think it was our 18th anniversary that was coming up. And I remember the kids like, oh, y'all about 18 years. And I remember a kid asked me, have you ever hit your wife? And I was like, nah, I ain't never hit my wife. And the entire classroom clapped. And I was like, huh? Why y'all clapping? And every student in there was like, because they know either one of their parents was involved in domestic violence, their aunties or uncles are involved in it, or they know someone in it. And it really blew my mind because here I am delusional thinking that it only happens over there, but it happens way often than not. And we really need to talk about that, party people. That's all I got.
Wow. Dantrez Omi. Dantrez, before you bounce, bro, let people know where they can find your movement.
Two places, where my killer tape at, and you can find that on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're about to do our 100th episode. The second and the fourth Saturday of every month, I have a male's emotional group. It's called Fresh to Death. If you're interested, just go online, punch in Dantrez Omi, send me an email, and we do it on Google Hangouts the second and the fourth Saturday of every month. So we got one coming up next Saturday. It's an emotional health group for men. Because fellas, we need to start doing the emotional work.
Wow. Dantrez Omi, the capoeista, the black male feminist, the mature B-boy, the t-shirt model. And people can find you where?
Dantrez Omi. Just go on Google, put Dantrez Omi, and you'll find all my stuff on there.
Ashe. All right, so let's go back to Islam. Are there any pieces in the Holy Quran that will give guidance to those sisters who need to leave their relationships that are abusive?
Previously about the rights of women in Islam, and we have a right, like I said, to be able to live, without harm in our homes and in our communities. We have a right to knowledge and education, and I think that so often that is being taken away from women, and even they're doing it to themselves as well. I'm not blaming the victim. I'm saying as far as not being knowledgeable about the Quran. Don't let someone else tell you what's in the Quran. We should be studying, we should be reading, and then the men in the family, the brothers, the husbands, the fathers, you should be educating your daughters. It is incumbent upon you as a man in Islam to educate the women in your family. It is required that they do that. It is required that they educate the women, they protect the women, and they provide maintenance for the women. Physical, mental, spiritual, financial, educational maintenance for the women in Islam. And if that's not being provided to you, one of the remedies in Islam is that if a couple is having a problem, they're supposed to get someone from each family to intervene and to talk with them, to help them resolve this issue. And that is something that is not being done oftentimes in Islam. And we need to make sure that we speak a voice to the oppression that we may be receiving in our families and talk to people, and don't be afraid to speak out about it, and make sure that our daughters, are financially independent. They're educated and financially independent. So when they find themselves in that relationship, they can exercise their God-given right to get a divorce if you need to. Don't let the religion keep you in an oppressive situation, when in the Quran it tells us to fight oppression no matter where we see it. Do not oppress ourselves. Do not let anyone oppress us. We have the power, and we need to take that power back.
Wow.
Seiko, one thing that the Quran tells us, that Allah says that we should reverence the womb that bore us, and the respect that we're supposed to have for women is throughout the Quran. And it's something that is repeated over and over. Out of all of the individuals that you find in the Quran, Allah continues to go back to, we have to make sure that we take care of the women, that is our obligation, but not just take care of them, that we have to honor them, we have to cherish them. But one thing I did want to go back to, Dan Trez made some excellent points. Blaming the victim is always the wrong way to go. That many men, if we're looking at it from a religious point of view, they turn to religion because they're broken. So many men are broken. So many men have been the victims of observing violence within their home, within their families. And when they go to religion, sometimes they look at religion to be a stopgap, to allow them to heal. But if they just look at religion as a healing source and not go to the root of the problem and correct the problem itself, then religion just becomes a Band-Aid. It will always rear its ugly head. And when you're thinking about the coronavirus and us being quarantined and in isolation, the real you tends to come out. And when the real you comes out, sometimes the people around that individual male, they become the victims, because that male did not really get to the root of the problems that they have. And that's some of the things that we really need to think about.
Can you, I see,
Well, brother, I want to.
I see a comment.
Go ahead,
that says, I read the Quran for myself that it is okay to hit your wife. So I wanted my husband to address that misnomer.
So that was one of the points that when we first started to discuss the Quran, and that particular verse in the Quran that talks about hitting your wife, I mentioned earlier that the word that is used in Arabic, when they try to translate it to English, the transliteration of the Quran, they use the word hit. But once you study the Arabic language, you'll find out that that word that they use is not a word for hit, because that word doesn't translate over to English. It really means to go away from. So for example, when there's an issue between a husband and a wife, and the last resort is not, from the Quranic point of view, not to hit your wife or to hit your spouse, it is to leave that situation, just temporarily leave the situation. And that's the root of where that comes from. But there's so many people, because they don't study the Arabic, they don't study, as my wife mentioned earlier, the religion itself. And if you don't study, then you learn aspects of faith just by somebody's interpretation, and that's always going to get you in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Ashe. Okay, I'm glad you cleared that up. Sister Yassini is with us, and this is going to take us in an interesting direction. So, sis, I know you have a really interesting point that you want to make in regards to domestic violence and religion. So, make your point, and then we'll respond to your point offline. Go ahead.
Well, all right. And this will go in a whole nother direction, because the reason why there's domestic violence is low vibration on both sides. The one who's getting the beat down, the one who's giving the beat down are both low vibrational. Somebody has to rise up and either lift the other one up or get out of that situation. But staying there, dwelling on the lowest level, you're going to get those low level type things happening to you. And that's domestic violence. I don't think it has anything to do with religion. I think religion is the reason why it's allowed, okay? Because the Bible does teach suffrage. So suffrage may just mean you're going to get that ticket to heaven or that they really love you, or however you want to look at it, it's low self-esteem and it's low vibrational. Anytime you can get out of that situation. I came in late, but I did have some notes. And one thing I do want to say is that men who hit women, 9 times out of 10, those men won't fight a woman. He'll hit a woman if she's not fighting back. But if she punches us back, that'll be the end of that. They don't want to fight a woman. Ask them. Take a survey. Take the survey.
Sister, you have a book that you wrote. Actually 2 books. One is The Roses Left Behind. Does that relate any way to what we're dealing with today in terms of domestic violence?
It does. And not just physical violence, but mental violence also. And it's about religion. And it's my story. It's my life story. Growing up with my mom being a minister, my dad being a preacher, both Pentecostal religion. It was a lot to write about, and it's based on a true story. I couldn't get all the facts because my mother's not around for me to ask her about it. And this was going on in Chicago back in the 70s. So I was like 9, 10 years old back then. But from when I went back to look at my roots and my family history, I started to find out that, it's just a cult. It's a cult. In the name of Jesus, it's still a cult. So I'm not a religious person. I don't think blaming God for your low vibration or low self-esteem. I don't think you should be doing that. You want to blame all that kind of stuff on Satan, all right? Not God. Whomever.
You had some other points on domestic violence, right? What are some other things that you wanted to share with us?
Just the fact that, if somebody puts their hands on you, you don't need a Quran or a Bible or a word or anything to defend yourself. It should be innate. It should be innate. Just because he's your boyfriend or your husband doesn't give you a right to put your hands on them. So in that sense, my advice is, and I know what I'm talking about, pick up anything. Women don't fight fair. We fighting for survival. Like, get off of me. When you let a man continuously punch you like that, you're okay in it. You are okay in it. If he does that more than one time, you've okayed that. So I say, get up some nerve one day, keep your a candlestick or a beer bottle or a wine bottle or something nearby when he tries that again. Let him have it. You're living off of fear, and this is why you vibrating really, really low. You've got so much fear instilled in you. Reading the Bible is not going to bring that fear out. It's only going to make the fear worse, because you need to love your enemies and do all of that crap. But no, you don't. No, you don't. If someone hits me, I bet you I'm tagging them back with the quickness. Okay. And that's what women got to start learning. We as Black people, we so scary. We scared of everything. We don't want to. If somebody hits me, I promise you I'm hitting them back. Okay. All we got to do is get off our nerves. Stop being so scary about everything. Stop listening to that word unless you're going to decipher it for real.
Intriguing. So now we've had a point from somebody who's not connected with any religion, actually is way from a religion. Baba.
I'm a recovering.
Baba.
Yes.
I just
recovering for.
Yeah, I want to chime in something.
We're coming toward the end of our build. We're coming toward the end of our build. So, Baba, what does Ifa teach that will help a person gather the strength and stop being scared, like Yashini was saying, so they can leave an abusive situation? Is there anything that Ifa teaches that will provide the strength and the guidance for a practitioner?
So the sister was right about the vibrational thing. as I spoke earlier about energies being attracted to each other. But what some people have to be mindful of is you go from one extreme to the other. You were abused, and so if you're still vibrating on that abusive level, you have to be mindful of going from being the abused to becoming an abuser yourself, and whether it be verbal, mental, or whatever, in other relationships. So the key to this is to come to an understanding that some of this is learned behavior based on, as we spoke, someone spoke previously, being around abuse, seeing abuse, and things of that nature. So it's about changing the way you think and how you view things, and understanding what your purpose is while you're here. Then some of it, and it's too much to go into, could be what we call karmic debt. As the Bible would say, you reap what you sow. So you may not, if you were an abuser in another lifetime, you still have to pay for that. So in this lifetime, you may have experienced abuse because you abused someone else in a different lifetime. So it doesn't have to stay that way. But once you have had that happen to you, you have to change the way that you think. When the sister spoke of planning, all these different things, that is good, because she's absolutely right. Because wherever you go, there you are. You could say, I'm going to leave this man, and then spirit will give you the same thing again, wrapped up in a different package. Do you recognize it again? She was lucky enough, as she said, she took notes and said, okay, this looks just like that, so I'm not going to do that again. But then some people subject themselves to the same thing over and over and over again, thinking they're going to get a different result, which we know is insanity. As far as, we have an Odu called Owarren Meji, which speaks of honoring the mother, whether living or dead. So that's feminine energy that must always be honored. When you come to an understanding that all of creation, because man, we give life to nothing. It is the woman, that feminine energy, that gives life and birth to everything. It must be honored at all times. And if a man is being abusive, then he needs to figure out, why are you really abusing yourself? You create the thing that created you, or whatever. But it's just not something that we see a lot of for those that have been practicing Ifa a long time. It's usually those that are coming in, that are just coming in, that their spirit, their soul, energy, ancestors led them to this place so that they can learn how to heal themselves from the emotional baggage that they're carrying, that says, I'm supposed to get punched in my face. No, that's no.
But thank you
that's not there.
Baba. Baba, thank you for your insight from Ifa and from the ATR perspective. I want to bring back the Islamic perspective, and you already shared pretty much what Islam says in terms of the rights for women and things that can happen. But I'm still wondering if there's anything else that Islamic culture may have that will allow a sister involved in the Islamic culture to leave an abusive relationship. Anything that you haven't had a chance to talk about?
Well, there is no Islamic culture. Islam is comprised of many cultures. So that's the biggest problem that we have, because people look at the Muslims in Saudi Arabia and they see what they're doing and they say this is Islam. And they are the smallest populations of Muslims throughout the world. The majority of the Muslims are in Indonesia. And so people look at Saudi Arabia, women can't drive, they can't work, they're being abused, and they say this is Islam. There is no Islamic culture. You can bring your culture to the religion. If you are a convert, you don't have to stop being an African American because you're a Muslim. Doesn't mean that you're going to be an Arab. No, you're still an African American. So I wanted to say that, if your religion, regardless of what your religion is, if your religion is not empowering you, there's a problem. You should be empowered by your religion. Either you are not studying your religion, understanding it, or maybe you're in the wrong religion. But regardless, if you're Muslim or Christian or Jewish or whatever religion you practice, it should be for the purpose of empowering you. And so if you find yourself in a place where you're being oppressed and abused and you're not empowered, then that's the wrong place, or you're not really understanding your religion. I would say for women in Islam, do not let someone else tell you about your own religion. It is yours. You don't have to go to the imam. You don't have to go to your husband. You don't have to go to a male in your family. You have been given the intellect by Allah to study the religion and to tell people when they are wrong. And it is wrong if a man tells you that Islam allows me to beat my wife. And I wanted to say in the Quran, in chapter 4, verse 19, it says, dwell with your wives. It's talking to the men. Dwell with your wives in kindness. And for even if you hate them, it may be that you are hating someone that Allah has placed in your life for the good. And there's also, I wanted to add one, and then I'm gonna let my husband speak because I can go on. I wanted to add one more thing about.
Yeah, we need to wrap up.
I'm sorry. So I'm gonna let him go. Okay.
I think my wife made some great points, but Islam is not a monolith. Islam is supposed to incorporate the best of all cultures. So in Islam, we're supposed to reverence the woman. And as fathers, when we have daughters in the Islamic community, in the Christian community, in the Jewish community, we're supposed to make sure we teach our daughters. We teach them the right thing that men are supposed to do in terms of honoring them, because it all starts at home. So from that religious point of view, once you do good and you teach good to your children, you make sure you tell your daughters the things that men can't do to them. You would be surprised how we'll raise up a society that will do the things that will be protective and honoring the women that, are the fruit of our loins.
Ashe. Now, when we say Islam, the brothers involved in MST, the Moorish Science Temple, the teachings of the Prophet Noble Drew Ali, also use the term Islam. And I guess I don't want to go into the religions piece, but is there anything else that the Prophet Noble Drew Ali taught us that can help sisters leave abusive relationships and help those who are abusing stop abusing?
Yeah, true indeed. Well, what I was going to say, dear brother, is any man who is in whatever school of thought, any school of thought, if he's putting his hands on a female member of his family, clearly he's not the embodiment of the teachings. You see, whether you're Sunni, whether you belong to the NOI, whether you belong to the MST of A like myself, see, it's not a lip professing thing. And I think that's what happens with a lot of people who get into these schools of thoughts or into these organizations, is they're not the embodiment of the teachings. You see what I'm saying? You're supposed to be the message, which is what we say in the Moorish Science Temple of America. Be the message, be the truth, so that people can see it instead of pointing away. And one thing that I wanted to touch on as well is the very word Islam means peace. Islam means submission to the will of the divine force in the universe and peace. So how can one say that he or she is a Muslim and they're not at peace with their loved ones? And clearly, if you're physically abusing your mate or your consort, then you're not at peace. So are you really practicing Islam? Because see, this is a demonstration of peace. And one thing that I wanted to touch on too, as well, if I may.
Make it quick, brother. Make it quick.
Yeah, yes, sir. So we're taught early on in the MST of A the importance of the role of the woman in the family structure. You can just look at the cover of Quran Questions for Moorish Americans, and on the cover is an illustration of founder Prophet Noble Drew Ali holding the woman up in his arms. And he has one foot on solid land, and written on land it says salvation, and he has the other foot out in the water and it says the cares of the world, and written on the woman it says humanity. So this is what we mean when we say that we're uplifting fallen humanity by starting with the women. So it just tells you how important they are to the family structure. She's the nucleus. And one last thing that I'll say, and I'll end it off. Chapter 2 of the Holy Quran of the MST of A, which is titled The Education of Mary and Elizabeth in Zoe in Egypt, it starts off by saying that the love and holy zeal that John the Baptist, which in Christianity, they'll say John the Baptist, who was the forerunner of Jesus Christ. We don't say Jesus Christ, but I want, you know, for sake of argument, it talks about them getting their love and holy zeal and the things necessary to be saviors of humanity from their mothers, from their women. You know, the womb is the first school. So taught early how important it is to honor the sisters. And again, anybody in this who is lifting the hand at her, they're not living the truth, and they're just doing this. So, and with that, I yield back. So.
Ashe. Dantrez Omi, Sister Valerie, and Queen Phoenix. Sister Valerie, any last words? Any last words? Anything we can leave our sisters, our brothers with?
No, I just like to say you did a very, very excellent perspective from a religious aspect in domestic violence, how, you know, the religious, and I just want to amen what you shared here, is that because of the domestic violence victims' religious beliefs, it may hold them a little bit longer to a situation that they want to get out of. But because of their religious conscience, their religious passion, and their walk and journey, everyone's is different. No two are the same. And as a mental health therapist, we are culturally cognitive and sensitive to certain situations, and we can't put everybody all in one box and saying that they should do this or they should do that. It's a very touchy situation, different strokes for different folks, but always being culturally sensitive to the religion, to the journey, and to the victim, and unfortunately to the victimizer, because they're going through something, you know, the person that does the victimizing. So we just got to be culturally sensitive to all parties involved. Absolutely.
Did you just throw that to me? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Well, the only
Queen
thing,
Phoenix, last word. Last word, sis.
Well, the final thing I want to say, I agree with everybody that was on the that spoke today. But the biggest thing I want to say is, like Valerie said, you can't put everybody in the same box. Some women are fighters, some women are not fighters. And it all depends on where they're at, what frame of mind that they're in. And that's the biggest issue that we have with women that's in domestic violence, is their friends, their family saying, yeah, if he hits you, you need to do this and you need to do that. It's not that simple, especially when that person has now been emotionally attached, when they are in jail mentally. You don't know the battle that's going on in their head mentally. And so it's not as simple as you're saying, okay, someone hits you, hit them back. If that's not what you're taught and you're not a violent person as an individual, you can't expect that person to just automatically go into fight motion. It's not that simple. And I look at it that, yes, everyone want to look at the victim as what we should do and how we should handle it and how we should. But hold on, sometimes when you get hit out the blue, you're in shock mode. That's just like the first time you ever got shot. You're not going to automatically know exactly what to do. You're shocked. It affects you mentally, so you can't react or respond right away. It takes time. So I'm here to tell everybody, that's why I have the Phoenix Rise movement, because every woman is in a different place at a different time when they're going through their abuse. I am not a person to judge a person on what they should do, how they should do it, because I know when I was there, I went back to my abuser 15 times. Yes, I left, but I went back. And some people are like, well, why did you do that? You can say low vibrations, you can say whatever, but the simple fact is sometimes people don't have that family support. Sometimes they're isolated. Sometimes they just scared of being homeless with their kids and don't know where to go, who to get help from, or who to even trust. So before they can make a move, they need to make sure that they have that support. So if you are a family member or a friend out there who knows someone that's going through this, you just can't blurt out, well, hit back or leave. You can't do that. You first have to find out where they're at mentally, show them that, one, you support them, two, you're not judging them, and three, empower them, remind them of the strength that's inside. They need to know that someone believes in them more than they believe in themselves, and that person could be you. You could be that lifeline for somebody. And that's what you need to look at before you start giving options on how to leave. How about just start off with some support? How about just saying, hey, you know what? Someone out here loves you and care about you. Start with that first. And then from there, it will give them the strength to build themselves up to then leave. Like I said, it was one statement that kept me and resonated in my spirit to give me the strength. And that's one friend that told me, hey, kid, when you realize how beautiful you are on the inside would be the day that you leave your ex-husband. And I couldn't see that beauty at that time. But those words is what kept me going. Those words is what allowed me to start seeking internally and to get my vibrations on point and to get the strength that I needed to leave. So can we start there first by just giving the support versus trying to tell them what they did wrong? We already know what we did wrong. That's part of the reason why we're still there, because we feel ashamed and we don't want to talk about it. And that's why we don't let our family know that we're going through it. That's why I stayed in it so long, because I hid it. I hid the abuses. I hid the stuff I was going through because I felt the shame. I'm my worst critic. So can I get someone to show me another way before you start telling me the moves I can make? That's what Phoenix Rise is about.
All right. So how can people get in contact with you and with Phoenix Rise movement?
You can get in contact with me by emailing me at queenphoenix757@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook at Nikia, Nikia, Queen Phoenix. And believe me, I am the first person to tell you I will not set in judgment, but I'm here to show you and inspire you and uplift you to find the strength within. Because I'm telling you, this is a serious thing, and going untreated, you're just going to continue to repeat the cycle. And like I said, the next step to this is after you get out. The first step to healing is first forgiving yourself. I always tell people, you got to forgive the worst you. You're the best you have to forgive the worst you for making bad decisions. Once you're able to start forgiving yourself, then you can forgive others, which then the next step is start to forgiving your abuser. Because guess what? Forgiveness is not for the abuser. The forgiveness is for you to get strength to be able to move forward. And those are the steps that we'll show you how to do.
Queen Phoenix. So email her at queenphoenix757@gmail.com. Her and her organization will definitely help you raise your vibration, help you become a person involved in a safe situation. Hit up Queen Phoenix. I want to end with my good brother from another mother and father, Dan Trez Omi. Things that you mentioned that I want to leave and end with is the community responsibility to ending this abuse. So, you said that we have to step up. What are some other things that we have to do? What do we have to do, bro? What do we have to do? And you're muted, bro. You're muted. First thing you got to do is unmute yourself.
You're right. So the first thing we need to do is we need to listen to our women. When they come and say, hey, this brother assaulted me, we need to listen, right? Instead of judging. The second thing we need to do is support. And I remember there were times when I've helped sisters that were in need, and people would tell me, why are you helping her? Because she's going to go back to him anyway, right? At the end of the day. And that happened. But what I've learned, just like in any situation, when somebody's in need of help, we need to be there to support them as much as we can. Whether that means we feed their children or watch their children, if we help them get a ride to work, or we give them some money for gas, we have to really be that support system. If we're really that community, we're that village that we always claim to be, then we need to be that way. And then the last thing I'm going to say is, gentlemen, we need to speak about it. We need to speak about this. When we talk about domestic violence, We need to go in and talk about it. And some of us need to admit our crimes. There you go. Those 3 things. You got that, Sekou?
I got that. That's beautiful. That's instructional. That's guidance. And so let's all take this great guidance that we received tonight and let's help change our community. You know, conscious thought and becoming conscious, becoming woke is great. And it helps us with so many things. Becoming thoroughly immersed in your religious, spiritual walk puts us in a great place. But if we can't solve some of these situations that are affecting our community, if we can't solve those things, I'm just going to leave it there. We need to solve those things. So you might be conscious, you might be ATR, you might be Islam, you might be Christian, you might be MST, you might be Buddhist, you might be involved in any of those things. We still need to empower ourselves to improve our community. Domestic violence is one of the things we need to work on. It's just one of the things we need to work on. So get empowered, get on code. And our code is improvement. Our code is empowerment. Our code is empowerment. So get on code, stay fly.